How's it going, everyone? Welcome to this week's Q&A. So like any other week, if you want a chance to one of your questions being answered, make sure you drop a comment down below. And like always, I try to get to each and every question for you, whether in the comment section or in a video next week. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with this week's first question. And it is, what should you be doing for leather protection if your leather does get damaged, etc. So first and foremost, you should be using leather conditioner on any of your vehicles that do have leather. Pick your poison, pick your brand, whatever you want. Just find one that you like and use it accordingly. Now, if your leather happens to get damaged, depending on the type of damage, there are places that address this, whether some minor cracking or anything of that nature. Then there's upholstery places that could probably do this for you, or at least make it look better. Now, if it's completely damaged and you got big holes in it, obviously an older type vehicle, or maybe you got a cut in it from a key or something along those lines, then there are replacements either from Honda, or there is a brand called Cat Skin that offers a lot of different combinations of patterns and colors and stuff like that. But obviously at that point, you would have to replace the whole entire interior because obviously you don't want to have just one seat mismatched from the other seats. Likewise, if you do end up replacing that portion of the seat, whether it be the seat back or the seat bottom of the vehicle, or both of them, typically it's the driver's side that gets more worn out than the other seats, because obviously there's always a driver in the car, right? If you do just the front driver's seat, and your other seats are older, then it might be a noticeable difference as well. So in that case, maybe you want to do the two front seats at the same time, or whatever the case may be. Obviously, again, if it's an older vehicle, you also may run into the chance that these parts are discontinued from Honda or Acura or whatever the manufacturer is. So something you want to keep in mind. And typically these aftermarket companies, they offer these products for a lot longer. Last but not least, you could do a seat cover. I know obviously if you have leather, that's probably not something you want to do, although it would solve your solution and at a very effective price. So hopefully that answers the question for you. So the next question is, what is best spark plug practices? Should you use any type of lubricant, or should you be using any type of impact tool or whatever? So I don't like using impact tools with spark plugs. They can crack very easily, especially these new thinner plugs found on a newer engine. So you're going to want to torque those spark plugs to 16 pound-feet of torque. And if you have a coil on plug, which most cars nowadays do, you're going to want to torque that bolt to 8.7 pound-feet of torque, or 9. Obviously, most torque wrenches aren't going to be into increments of 8.7 exactly. So 9 is fine. You're not going to damage anything. So as far as lubricating with anti-seize or grease or any of that stuff, I'm going to tell you to stay away from it. My rule of thumb is, if Honda doesn't do it from the get, then I'm not going to do it on my end either, unless if it's suspension bolts, because we know here in the Northeast or anywhere that is prone to rusting, that is an issue. So different topic for a different day. But spark plugs, no grease, no anti-seize, no sort of lubricant, unless if the threads somehow got rusted. Maybe you had a loose spark plug, which does happen sometimes from factory, and there is some rust buildup or just some crud. Try to clean those out with a blowgun or something like that, and then maybe apply a very, very thin layer of engine grease. I would not use anti-seize. That stuff gets real clumpy, but in most cases I wouldn't apply any sort of lubrication or any grease or any anti-seize or anything like that. So hopefully that answers the question for you. Okay, so the next question is there any long-term benefits of applying your parking brake versus relying just on your parking pole inside the transmission solely to hold your car in the park position? And typically, we don't see any damages to these parking poles at all, not to the point where it comes out of park or anything of that nature. Although it's definitely best practice to always apply the parking brake in most cases, especially if you're on an incline or a decline. You notice that if you do park on an incline or decline and you don't use the parking brake, then once you put the vehicle into reverse or drive, you hear a loud bang. And so in theory, yes, in time that would wear out that parking pole or the locking mechanism for the parking system. So especially if you do park on one of those circumstances, then for sure you're going to want to use your parking brake in most cases. I've personally never seen any of these parking poles fail. If you do have seen one, if you're a technician or if you had a vehicle with one of them fail, unfortunately, it was probably a bad day for you because the car probably wasn't where you left it to begin with. But yeah, I've never seen that happen, but in theory, it can happen. And regardless, you should be using your parking brake, in most circumstances. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, so this next question is, how do I pinpoint a cold start misfire from a defective head gasket or a tight valve situation? So obviously there's going to be tons and tons of factors here, but in most cases, this is what happens. So cold start, a misfire, you will have, once again, at the cold start, you won't relatively feel it, although the computer will count and you can see it in the data list. So if it's a head gasket cold start misfire, then it's going to be after you run the car hot, you let it cool off, and you will start the vehicle and you will actually feel the misfire 9 out of 10 times versus a tight valve situation. You will not feel the misfire 9 out of 10 times, unless if it's to that point where it's really, really bad already. So another way to pinpoint this is obviously we take a borescope or endoscope, whatever you want to call it, and we pressurize the coolant system and we see the coolant literally trickle down into the cylinder wall or down the cylinder wall into collecting on top of the piston. So very easy to pinpoint that way. Now, if it's a tight valve situation, then once the car is fully warmed up, I check for the map value to make sure A, that it's nice and low, and B, that it's nice and steady. So if there's a lot of fluctuation there in my readings, then I'm not gonna like that, and I'm gonna suspect a tight valve or some sort of mechanical type of malfunction. So once again, once you start a car on a defective head gasket or bad head gasket, if you make it past the point where it doesn't go into limp mode, then the car will drive just fine until you park it next time, you let it cool off, and it will misfire once again. So just a couple quick things. Obviously, there's a lot more to it than that, but that's kind of what I go off of right away, and then if needed to address that from there. So hopefully that answers the question for you. All right, last but not least, question of the week is, why is Honda so dedicated to their internal water pump and timing belt J series or V6 engines? And at this point of the game, I think I've answered this question already in a similar situation, but at this point of the game, where ICE engines seem to be dying and the EV movement seems to be going forward, whether you agree with it or not, I don't think it would be financially beneficial for Honda to go and reinvent the wheel here and make a totally new V6 application. It would require tons and tons and tons of R&D for a very short-term gain, in my opinion. So I think for that alone, they're going to leave it for that reason. And as well as, why fix something that's not broken? I know people argue that timing chains are, you don't have to service them and, X, Y, and Z. But in most cases, we see that when timing chains do fail, it actually ends up costing more money because it's a sealed system and it's more time consuming versus a timing belt situation. So if you maintain your vehicle well and you do your timing belt, most people probably won't even do the timing belt once in their vehicle ownership, because a lot of people just don't keep these vehicles long enough. To the people that do, you'll probably be replacing it one time and one time only. As far as the water pumps go, I've yet to see any Honda water pumps really leaking, unless if they have, some sort of aftermarket coolant. On the J series, this is. Some of the other engine, yes, but on the J series, they've been very, very, very solid. So there's no reason to, again, reinvent the wheel here. And I've even seen some people not changing a water pump, and in most cases, it'll be okay. Obviously, if you're in there, in my personal opinion, I'm going to tell you to change a water pump, and I won't even do the job without doing it. But like I said, these J series water pumps, I have yet to see one leak. I'm sure there are some out there. If you're a tech, again, drop a comment down below and let me know. But just one of those things that at this point of the game, it wouldn't make any sense, in my opinion, for Honda to just invest all that R&D for a short-term gain. So hopefully that answers the question for you, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.